Welcome to part 2 of the Watercolour Collage series. In this video we are going to create the next layer using watercolour pencils. We will explore a variety of different techniques you can do with the pencils and create different textures and patterns on the leaves. Let's get started. The materials we will be using in this video are watercolour pencils. Choose colours that suit the colours you used in your background. The colours I am using will appear on the screen throughout the video. An eraser, a pencil sharpener, a white gel pen, a fine paintbrush, I use the size 2, paper towel for blotting, and white gouache. Start off with, I'm going to sketch in the basic shapes of the leaves to form the next layer. I'm using a 2B watercolour graphite pencil and I'm just going in very lightly. As with the first layer, you want to create depth and shape with the leaves. So you want to overlap some of the leaves, have different sizes and different shapes. Think about how the leaves look on the actual tree. Go outside and explore, take some photos or even pick up some dropped branches and have a look how the leaves sit on the branch. Think about how they curl and think about the directions that they move in. You can see that I have a variety of different sized leaves. I have some long and thin, some short and stubby. I have some curling one way and some curling the other. I have gaps in the leaves where there are bites or tears, and I have a whole heap of different variety. This is what you want to make it look as realistic as possible. At the end of the branches, I'm making the leaves slightly smaller. When you look out in the real world, you see that the leaves at the end of the branches are often smaller. They're the small developing leaves. This just adds a sort of a full stop to the end of the branch and makes it look a bit more cohesive. The leaves I am putting over the top sort of follow the same pattern as the leaves in the background. So they're going in the same direction, but they are overlapping and creating points of interest. Once you have finished drawing up your basic sketch, it's now time to move on to using the watercolour pencils. Through this part, I'm going to show you a whole heap of different techniques. To start off with, I'm using an 8B watercolour graphite pencil to start blocking in some shadows. I really like using the watercolour graphite because you get a really nice dark colour without it being completely black. And I also like the way that the graphite reacts to the gouache underneath. Using a very fine brush after colouring in on the page, I use a small amount of water to spread out the colour that I put on the page. You use watercolour pencils in a very similar way to the way you use your pan paint. The more water you use, the more the way the colour will spread out. Here I am dotting the colour across the leaf to sort of create texture. Similar to how we created the background in the beginning, I am dropping the colour back into the wet surface to make it spread out. dropping plain water into the colour that I've already put down to disperse the colour and to leave a pitting on the surface that sort of reflects the same way that gum leaves have. Now I'm going through with a green pencil, and while the surface is still wet, I'm drawing in detail. Using a dry pencil on a wet surface will give you a very strong, inky feel and will give you big, strong, bold lines. Just keep in mind that if you do this technique, it is very difficult to blend the lines out, so you will get a harsh line, unlike if you colour on a dry surface and then spread the colour out with a wet brush afterwards. Now I'm adding the veins to the leaves. I'm using a very sharp pencil. I highly recommend keeping a sharpener handy so you can sharpen your pencils as you go along. To get some of the best effects, I find that the sharper the pencil, the better. And I'm just spreading these lines out with my brush just to give it that nice softened edge. To give your leaves shape and dimension, make sure you vary your tone throughout the piece. Think about where the dark patches and the light patches are going to be on your leaves. It is important to think about where your light source is in your painting, and this is going to reflect on how the branches are shaded and how your leaves are shaded. On this piece, I'm imagining the light source coming directly from the front, so the tone on my leaves and that are very even on both sides. Key thing when painting your leaves is also to think about the little nuances that you see on the tree. This is what will help bring it to life. Examine the leaves and see all the little pits and the flaws across the leaves. Also look at the branches and the twigs. They're not straight. They have lumps and bumps. These are important to give the feeling of realism. Give the feeling of overlapping, the leaf behind is going to be a lot darker than the leaf in the front. I like to exaggerate these tones to really create that feeling of backwards and forwards movement, which is a thing going backwards and a thing going forwards in the piece. So when you think about it, what we are doing is we are taking a three-dimensional object, we are putting it on a two-dimensional surface, but attempting to make it look 3D. It sounds complicated, but it's easy when you think about how to use tone. So things that are further away are going to be darker, and the things that are in front are going to be lighter. Using a white gel pen, I like to add highlights to really bring forward some aspects of the leaf. It's also a great tool to use to create really fine lines and to create small dots on the surface. The great thing about gel pens is because they are water soluble, you can easily blend your lines out with a wet brush afterwards. and to create a seamless blend. Using colours other than green in your leaves will also help create a variety of tone. When you look at a gum leaf, you can actually see that there are a variety of different colours that make their way through. I really like using purples and reds in my leaves to create depth and a variety of textures. Here I'm using a purple pencil mixed in with the green. It creates a really nice soft browny tone, which doesn't make the leaf look dead, but just adds a nice variety of colour. Now we're going to sketch in some gum flowers. I'm just using my 8B pencil here, and I'm just drawing some gum nuts to start off with. Once I've sketched that in, I now grab a yellow pencil. This is a light yellow, and I'm just doing quick pencil strokes to create the fluffy texture of the gum flowers. After using the pencil on the dry surface, I now use my wet brush to spread the colour out. Just flicking my brush to keep that fluffy texture that you see on gum flowers. I'm bringing some of that dark lead pencil from the gum leaves down into the flower to create shadow. Now I'm going in on the wet surface with a dry pencil and just adding some more texture. Again, you can see that when you add the dry pencil to the wet surface, you get a very strong inky colour. This is a great technique to use if you want to create some really dark and strong textured areas. Now using a green, I'm adding my shadows to the gum nuts to create that curved feeling. I'm adding a dark shadow on one side and a lighter shadow on the other side, and it will give it that rounded feeling. Using the pencils is a great way to get finer details that you might struggle with using just pan paint. Using some white gouache, I'm going to add small dots at the end of the petals to create the little frill of the gum flower. You can also use a white gel pen. hesitate to vary the size of the dots just to make it look a little bit more realistic. Gum leaves are a very waxy leaf, so they don't really wrinkle like other leaves do. So to create that feeling of texture, you really want to look at the pittings on the surface. Watercolour pencils are a great way to create those textures. Using good quality pencils is also going to really help here. As you can see, I'm only applying a little bit of colour to the surface, but once I apply the water, it spreads out quite far. This is because the pencils are very highly pigmented. Don't be afraid to experiment with colour either. Leaves are not just green. Now see how the piece is starting to take shape. Our first layer has formed almost a shadow in the background, which gives the feeling of the leaves further in the distance. Our current layer that we're working on now has more detail and is brought forward. This gives depth and movement to the piece and looks like actual leaves sitting on a tree. It is important to move your piece around while you work and look at it from different angles. This will help you with perspective. Also, step back from your work every once in a while and hold it up or have a friend hold it up for you so you can look at it from a distance. When you're looking at something on a flat surface and from the same angle, it can be easy to lose perspective in your piece and things will become out of proportion. Moving your piece around, looking at it upside down and from a distance will help you see it from all different angles and see where perspective needs to be changed. I love using the surface as my page as a palette and actually blending the colours together on the surface. This technique is something that's really fun to do with watercolour pencils. Remember to take your time with the piece. If you need to step away and have a break, that's absolutely fine. A painting doesn't need to be completed in one day. In fact, taking a break sometimes helps you come back to your piece with a new perspective, and you can see errors or places that need a little bit more work than what you could see when you were working on it before. Once you're happy with everything, just have a once over and see if any places need some slight fixing up. Maybe some areas need to be darkened a bit more to give that backwards and forwards movement, or some white highlights needed to be added in. I hope you enjoyed part 2 of our watercolour collage project. Be sure to join us in part 3 where we will finish our piece by adding our watercolour collage layer, where we will further explore different techniques with the watercolour pencils. Be sure to check us out on our Facebook page where you can find up-to-date information about what's going on at Artworks. Have fun and remember to stay creative.